The sun had just emerged from behind the hills, its golden rays sweeping across the expanse of rice fields that were starting to turn green. Morning dew still clung to the tips of the rice leaves that were slowly growing after being planted a few weeks ago. I stood on the embankment, watching the rice plants grow taller, and as usual, I carried a small container in my hand. Today I was going to hunt for snails, small pests that often damage young rice. With careful steps, I stepped on the slippery embankment, feeling the cold mud between my toes. I began to walk along the rice field, bending my body to look for small snails that usually hide between the rice stalks. It didn't take long for my eyes to catch a snail shell that was still wet, attached to a young leaf. I immediately took it and put it in the container. As my steps continued to move, I found more and more snails. Some were still very small, some were already a little bigger. I knew that if left alone, these snails would reproduce quickly and eat the still weak rice stalks. That was why I had to diligently collect them. Not only to maintain good harvest results, but also because these snails can be used as animal feed at home. The morning wind blew softly, carrying the distinctive aroma of wet rice fields. Occasionally, the sound of sparrows could be heard from a distance, hiding in the bushes on the edge of the rice field. I continued hunting, rolling up my pants to my knees to move more freely in the mud. Some of the snails I found had started to lay eggs, attaching small pink grains to the rice stalks. I carefully picked them up, making sure none were left behind. I smiled with satisfaction, seeing the results of my hard work this morning. Although simple, hunting snails in the rice fields gave me a sense of calm and satisfaction. Not only because I helped keep the rice plants healthy, but also because I felt closer to nature, understanding every little detail that happened in this rice field. Occasionally you look at the vast, green rice fields. The planting season is still long, and there will be many more days like this. However, I don't mind. Because, behind its simplicity, there is a special happiness when caring for the rice fields and seeing the rice grow well. With enthusiasm, I brought my catch home, ready to return to the rice fields tomorrow. The sun slowly rose from the eastern horizon, its warm rays caressing the expanse of rice that was starting to grow. I took a deep breath, inhaling the distinctive scent of wet soil and young leaves. This was part of my routine, hunting snails every morning before the day turned to noon. The snails seemed endless. Every day I walked along the embankments, treading through the mud between the rows of rice, and always found them in large numbers. It was as if they kept emerging from the water, hiding behind the rice stalks, sticking to the leaves, or even laying eggs in the mud. Even though I collected so many every day, the snails were still there, as if unaffected by the amount I had taken. However, I did not give up. Although it was impossible to eradicate them completely, at least I could reduce their numbers. These snails were voracious pests, devouring the young leaves of the rice until only the weak stalks were left. If left alone, they could cause farmers to lose their harvests that should have been a source of livelihood. That was why I kept hunting, even though I knew they would always return. The mud on my feet deepened as I walked further. My hands nimbly reached for the snails visible on the surface. Some were still small, while others were already quite large. Some had laid eggs, leaving pink traces on the rice stalks. I collected them carefully, making sure not to leave any behind. In the distance, the sound of sparrows flying low over the rice fields could be faintly heard. The wind blew gently, shaking the young rice stalks. I looked at this expanse of green with hope. If the snails were not hunted, they would continue to breed and damage the crops. However, if every farmer did the same, at least we could reduce their negative impact. As I walked back to the embankment, I knew that I would return the next day. The snails would never be completely gone, but as long as I could reduce their numbers, the rice would still have a chance to grow well. I smiled, feeling proud of what I had done. This might be a small job, but it would have a big impact on the upcoming harvest. My sharp gaze scanned every corner of the rice field, looking for something small but dangerous for the future of my plants. Small snails, which if left to grow large, would be a real threat to the rice I planted in the next season. So, with great patience, I bent down, scooping up the snails I found one by one. Every now and then I had to dig through the mud with my hands, making sure nothing escaped my sight. Although tiring, I realized how important this step was. Every small snail I picked up today was a threat I had eliminated from the future of my plants. I remember, a few years ago I had ignored this. When the planting season arrived, I found many rice stalks that had fallen, eaten by golden snails that were growing out of control. The harvest was also drastically reduced, making me learn from that bitter experience. Since then, I no longer want to let them breed without supervision. And I know, this work requires patience, but I am sure the results will be worth it. When the planting season arrives, I want to see the rice growing well without interference. Because for me, farming is not just a job. It is a life, a legacy from my ancestors that I must protect. And protect the rice fields from any threat, no matter how small.